Hey everybody, this is Perch, and I've been sent this a few times, and it's an interesting commentary. Now this is older. This is from Larry Hama, and you see it on the screen here, but we'll read it to you so you don't have to jump to a video. And basically, this was some time ago, and it talks about the question to Larry Hama was, is there a specific audience you're writing for? Talking about comics and age groups and, kind of this balance of, do you write for a younger audience or older audience, or what do you do when people get older? And this is what Larry writes. I want to read it to you in its entirety. Not that long, but it's 2 paragraphs. And I talk about it because it's an interesting point he makes that I think is not wrong, but anyway, we'll get right to it. So Larry Hama, obviously a legendary writer and huge contributor to comics, another person who's done a ton. This was, I want to say this was at least a decade ago, probably long. I think it was quite some time ago, actually. Potentially back during the 80s and 90s. I wish I had the date. This frustrates me a little bit. But anyway, Larry says, basically he's asked, is there a specific audience you're writing for? And Larry answers, well, yeah. I think that the major part of the market that buys comics is between 8 and 13-year-old or thereabouts. I tried not to write down. I figure if they don't understand something, then they can look it up. I also figure that any kid that's reading a comic is reading, which probably makes him a cut above other kids in his age group who never read anything other than what they were required to read in school. And I figure what they want from a comic is an entertaining read. I'm really not out to do anything else. My primary objective is to entertain. My objective is not to curry the favor of someone that writes reviews of things. That's a powerful paragraph, but he goes on with one more. The problem with the fans, I think, is that they're trying to see something in the medium that's not there, trying to rationalize their involvement in something that they should have given up when they were 14 by trying to read something into the comics that isn't there and, in a way, shouldn't be there. They take it too damn seriously. Read real books. I love reading. All right. Second paragraph takes it in a different direction than the first, but let's go through that because there's a bunch of just solid facts in what Larry wrote. First off, he's identifying that the market, and this is why I say I think this is the market circa the 80s. I believe it's from that time period. The market that buys comics between 8 and 13-year-olds or thereabouts. Well, if you go back to the 80s, the 8 to 13-year-old demographic for comics was huge. They were buying a ton of comics. Now prices were obviously much cheaper there, and accessibility was better too. You could buy it in the newsstand. You could, the comics were everywhere. But that was the market. If you could capture that market, it was very attractive because they tended to become lifelong customers of comics, which in a way contradicts what Larry says down below. But that was the market. Today, we look at that market and we say that's YA, or actually a little bit less than that market. But here's the interesting thing. All this talk about comic numbers and all that kind of stuff, the audience for comics right now that is still buying comics, that dogman audience is, are you ready? It's between 8 and 13 years old. Toward the top end of that, the 13 area, is where you get into the Raina Telgemeier stuff. Scholastic is killing it with 8 to 13. And you know who else is killing it with that demographic? Yeah, it's manga. Demon Slayer and My Hero Academia, those kinds of books that are doing incredibly well, are killing it in that demographic. That audience knows that genre extremely well. Now, granted, older people absolutely do too. There's lots of people talking about getting into manga, and that's fine. It works for them. They're clearly happy with what they're buying. But right now, Scholastic and manga are owning the 8 to 13-year-old market. Whereas with the traditional comics, with Marvel and DC, they really struggle in that area. They put stuff out either for their YR market, like the I Am Not Starfire or the Nubia, or Primer. Primer does well. Again, all the clues are there. Primer does extremely well with that market. The other two do not. Well, what's the difference? I think it's sort of in the next words that Larry says, which is, I'm trying to entertain. I figure I try not to write down, he says. When he writes a comic, he tries to write something that's going to be entertaining to that group, but he doesn't try and write it in a condescending, childish way that audience is going to pick up on. one of the key things, and anybody with children knows this, and I've got 2 children now between 8 and 13, neither one of them want to be perceived as needing kind of baby work or kid work. They both want to read things that are above what they do, and they'll stretch themselves. That's kind of natural in that age group. They want to stretch themselves up to read things that's for them. Now, you may look at something like Dogman and go, well, this is obviously very childish and everything else, but if you look at it, the jokes are just slightly more mature, slightly more involved. It's not dirty jokes or anything like that, but nothing in the writing makes you feel like they're writing down to you. And if you look at, say, some of IDW's like Marvel Action comics or some of the comics where they build them for kids, or even things like the Unbeatable or whatever, the Wasp series, or Squirrel Girl, you'll notice that the writing comes across as extremely condescending toward that age group, and very kind of inside. It's like people are trying to make those inside Pixar jokes, but they do it in a way that just sounds sarcastic to kids. Kids realize that there's a joke being made. They don't necessarily understand it, but they feel like they're being talked down to. And it doesn't work. That blows up. So Hama says, I figure what they want is a comic that is an entertaining read. That's probably the sentence of the decade right there. Yeah, that's all they want. They want to feel like they're entertained for the 10 minutes or whatever that they're reading this comic. His primary objective is to entertain. And then here's his next sentence, which again, smart. My objective is not to curry the favor of someone that writes reviews of things. So let's abstract it. Let's assume for a moment this was written back in the 80s. If you take it in today's context, it's saying, basically my objective is to write an entertaining comic. My objective is not to get likes or, hearts from social media. My objective is not to get this shallow stuff. My objective is when somebody picks up the comic and enjoys it, that's what happens. That's a contract that's being made with the customer, and dead accurate. It's spooky. Again, I'm assuming this is from the 80s type time frame. It's spooky that you come back to 2021 and this stuff is absolutely true. Now, the next paragraph is interesting because he's basically saying, my problem with the fans, is that they're trying to see something that's not there, trying to rationalize their involvement in something they should have given up when they were 14. That's an interesting statement because obviously comic publishers and companies like comic fans sticking around. And even in the 80s, Jim Shooter made many comments about, continuing to give to the people who are staying with the comic. If you hooked somebody between 8 and 13, you still want them when they're 25 buying comics. There's nothing wrong with that, and you want that money in that customer. But it is interesting that he notes they're trying to see something that's not there. And I can't help but think that feels a little bit like what we see go on in social media and with Twitter with it's canon now, this person is bi-curious or whatever it happens to be. It's this desire to want to project onto these comics very subtle things. It's like, for decades, Iceman ran around and you can point to little panels and moments that maybe you could read into it that he's gay. But it didn't matter to the comic. Comics should try to be entertaining. Comic had these moments kind of go through, but none of it needed to go further than that. And comics today, there is a desire to go further than that, to lead into all these things, to not just hint at something or maybe just have a throwaway joke, but rather have it all mean something. Have this one panel, basically try to relate to this older audience, which loses the younger audience. Now, again, I don't agree that people shouldn't be there. That older audience should not be there. They should read some real books. Although I do agree, you should read some real books. I think reading is useful, just to make you a smarter, stronger person. You should read. But all the same, I think his point is still dead on. It's you take it too damn seriously. Yeah, some of these comics, you want to take the enjoyment of comics seriously, but it's the enjoyment you want to take seriously, not necessarily the comic itself. These are serious things and serious topics, but enjoyment should come first. The desire to take it seriously or to provide deeper meaning into things should not supersede the entertainment. I love looking at these kind of older quotes and older things that are said and kind of mulling it around in today's context. I find it fascinating. And I find this 2 short paragraphs from Larry Hama, again, obviously a legend in comics. It's an interesting perspective. I find it funny if somebody said this now in an interview. I think everybody would be pissed. I think all groups would line up to want to be pissed at this statement. But I think there's a lot of truth in it. And I think there is a hidden secret there, which is, you know, you're writing for a target audience that is ready and willing. We talk about the comic market changing, but the amazing part is the 8 to 13-year-old market is as strong today as it was in the 80s. Yes, it is. People like to say, no, people on their phones now or people on their tablets, except we see from manga, we see from Scholastic and Dogman, they're still buying this stuff. They're happy to buy this stuff. Kids love it. Even though, my daughter loves to do Minecraft. Cool. But she absolutely enjoys, reading Scholastic. She's very into Demon Slayer right now. Loves it. And it's not a digital only world. That audience is still there. It never left. But the comic publishers largely left them. And I think that's broken the whole chain. But anyway, it's an interesting perspective. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. And thanks for listening.